2020, March 23rd, I wake up on the floor gasping for air. The EMS shows up, the police department shows up. I remember laying there and looking at the cop. He literally goes down and he says to me, if you don't get the flip up, you're gonna die here. He helped me up, and I remember standing, my eyes rolled back, and I was dead. So I'm in the spiritual realm. I see this figure, and as it comes clear, I'm like, holy crap, it's Jesus.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to God's Voice. Today, I'm your host, Vladimir Prokhnevsky, and it is my mission to share as many supernatural encounters with you as possible. And speaking of supernatural encounters, I have a powerful one for you today. This one is with my friend Bobby Saroza. And Bobby had a near-death experience. Bobby flatlined 5 times. He died 5 times in one day. He was a skeptic. He didn't believe in any of this supernatural stuff until he had a face-to-face encounter with Jesus and a few other people. But before I play this interview for you real quick, I just want to invite you to join our free private community at family.godsvoiceday.com. And if you take the time to register, I will take the time to personally record a thank you video with this dry erase board. I'll put your name on here and welcome you to our community. So please register for the community. It's absolutely free. And now, without any further ado, ladies and gentlemen, here's my conversation with my friend Bobby. Enjoy. Well, Bobby, before we jump into your near-death experience, and you got some awesome experiences to share with us, and your encounter with Jesus, and then your friend, and then the third person. But before all of that, can you kind of set the stage for what your life was like before that experience?
Sure. So I was raised Catholic, and I'm Cuban. And trust me, I may go all over the place, but I'll bring it back together.
Sounds good.
So I was put into like Spanish catechism. Had no clue what the heck they were talking about. So I would just sit there for an hour on Sundays, and I really didn't like going to church. And, my mom and my grandparents go to church. And then I became a police officer at the age of 19. And it was great. And then my first encounter where I started to resent God was when my grandmother passed away. She passed away, I think, when I was about 22 years old. She raised me. And at that point, I was like, how dare you? Because she was the poorest of 9 sisters. And she was also the most hardworking. So I was like, how dare you take her away from me? And right there was, I would say, my first initial feeling of resentment towards God. And then as time went on in law enforcement, 2 years later, my grandfather passed, which I was okay with because I knew it was happening. But when you are in law enforcement, and I worked 10 minutes outside of New York City on the New Jersey side, we dealt with everything, murder, robbery, things like that. So when you see Satan's work, 32 hours a week, all the time, you start to question. I even locked up pastors with drugs, right? So you start to question, if God is real, why is this all happening? So, and it just got worse. And I call it my faith tank just kept going down and down and down and down until it probably was about 5%. And then in 2008, like I mentioned to you before, Vladimir, I got into finance, and by 2010, I left the police department, but I still had all that baggage. And, several years later, I met my wife, and she was not religious like that, like what we call a Bible pusher. And then several years later, she meets God through a gentleman who is a pastor, and she decides to get baptized. As a supporting husband, I went through the motions to show her support. I got baptized too. Again, right? One time when I was a Catholic as a child, second time was as an adult, but I did it in support of her. But again, my fuel tank was about 5%. My faith tank was about 5%. So it was difficult. We run a business together, and she would play Christian music, before in the office, or she would talk about God, and it used to piss me off. We used to get into arguments about it all the time. Like, I would shut up. I don't want to hear it. I was literally like, shut up. I don't want to hear it. Stop talking about that. This is not the place. And I just deterred away from it. I just didn't want to hear anything because I had all this resentment built up for so many years that I didn't want to accept that there's possibly a God. And, I was a really douche about the entire thing. And, it turns out that in 2020, March 23rd, 2020, the night before, I went to sleep perfectly fine. I was watching Tiger Joe on Netflix. Right? I always say Tiger Joe did it to me. Right? And so I was watching Tiger Joe, and the next morning I wake up on the floor gasping for air, not knowing that I already turned blue before that. I wake up gasping for air, and it feels like someone's kicking you in the chest as you're trying to breathe out. I'd rather get punched in the face, right? Because it's a one thing, it's quick. But I wish that pain on nobody. Of when you're trying to breathe, and it feels like you can't. And she was there with me. I remember getting in the fetal position because I remember my training. It helps with breathing. And she's there. And the EMS shows up. The police department shows up. And they're aware that I'm retired. And I remember laying there and looking at the cop. And he's like, does it hurt? And I'm just like, yeah. Right. It's pretty dramatic, right? It's like seeing a person choke. I'm literally choking myself to sleep because I can't breathe. And he literally goes down and he says to me, and I'm not going to curse, of course, but you can fill in the blanks. He says, if you don't get the flip up, you're going to die here. And at that point, that's when I reached out my arm. He helped me pull up. Now, I'm not a small guy. I'm 6'3", about 250, right? He helped me up, and I remember standing, and that's the last thing I remember. My wife, she fills in a lot of the gaps, and she says that they put me on a stair chair, which for those of you that don't know, it's literally what it is. It's a stair when they take you down it's a chair when they take you down the stairs. And she says I was holding on to the walls, and I was still speaking. And so the tough parts. And then she says, I looked back at her and I told her, I'm sorry. I'm tired. And that was the first time I died. She says, my eyes rolled back and I was dead. At this point, they rushed me to the ambulance downstairs. They throw me on a stretcher, and they start CPR. They revived me about 15 minutes later. I came back, and they were about to take off to the hospital. But then as they're about to, they went again. And this time I was out for about 40 minutes. And then they brought me back, and then they finally went to the hospital. And then it turns out that I actually showed up to the hospital dead. And I knew this because in law enforcement, or any first responder can relate to this, we don't get closure of what happened. So I made sure before I moved to Georgia that I would go visit them to thank them and ask them questions. And, I was like, why didn't you guys just quit? And they were like, you were perfectly fine. You were talking to us and you just went. And I thanked them for their service and helping me still be here today and give them closure. When they saw me, they were very surprised. They didn't even recognize me, obviously. You look better alive than you do dead. By the way, if I bring humor to my testimony, it's because it keeps my sanity. I just want to be very clear. I'm not making fun of anything or anyone, but it just keeps me sane. And I arrived at the hospital dead, and then it turns out to be that they brought me back, and then my wife was allowed to go in every 5 minutes for every hour. It was COVID. It's New Jersey. It's really bad. There's no visitors allowed. They only let her in because she knew the staff, because she's a retired EMS. So they gave her the leeway of her coming in. And she came in, and, she's young mom, and she's like, don't you dare effing die on me. I'm not going to be a widow, that whole thing. And she killed me. I go again. Right? I go again. And then she leaves, and she gets a phone call from her spiritual mentor, and the nurse comes outside, Vladimir, and she's saying, look, we don't know what's wrong with him. You should go in and say your goodbyes. So the spiritual mentor, who's the pastor, hears this, and he's telling her, don't you listen to her. That's the adversary working through her. You got to go in there and speak life into him. Well, she got another chance. This time she came in, and she whispered into my ear, spoke life into me. I don't know the exact words. Again, I'm out. And then she started praying over me. And she said that she started praying loudly, like yelling in her prayer. So this is like, and she opens up her eyes, and she sees the entire medical staff around me, holding hand in prayer with my wife. And I woke up. And from there, they took me to ICU. And here I am today because of those steps that were taken. And in ICU, well, let me tell you what happened when I wasn't here. So this is all happening here. Remember, the first time I died was already in my house. So I'm in the spiritual realm, and I'm floating on my back. Now, picture yourself laying in bed, and I take the bed under you, and now you're floating on your back, right? And so I'm floating in a dark space. I can see these white lights that, they weren't like spotlights. They were just white lights, and I'm floating. And as I'm floating, I see this figure fade in from the darkness from the right side of my foot, my right foot. And as it comes clear, I'm like, holy crap, it's Jesus. Like the first thing I remember saying was, oh my God, you're real. And I said, I'm so sorry. Like I get emotional enough because it's like, when someone tells you something and they tell you and you're like, yeah, whatever. And then it finally comes true. You feel like an idiot, right? You feel not vulnerable, but embarrassed. And he floats around my feet, and then he comes to me up from on my left hip, and I'm already floating in space. But what he does is he puts his arms under me like the wedding carry and just holds me as we float together. And I remember looking up at him. Again, just disclaimer, this is my testimony, my experience, because I know people are very opinionated. He's about 6'1". He's about 180, 185, great shape. I can see the veins in his forearms from like eating natural. He's got hair to the shoulders. I think maybe he uses a little bit of herbal essence, wasn't sure, but he's got hair to the shoulders. He's got a very thin lips, sharp, pointy nose, deep eyes, and he's got the sharpest jawline I've ever seen on anybody. It was so clear, Vladimir, that I can see the lining, the stitching on his cloth. I can see that it was that clear. And when I looked into his eyes, we didn't speak. By the way, he's not black. He's not white. He's Middle Eastern color, like a little less than olive. But when I looked into his eyes, I was overwhelmed with this peace. And when I felt this peace and this love that I can't describe to you on this earth what it is, I just knew I was going to be okay. even till today, like when things happen to us in life, I go back to that and I'm like, I just know I'm going to be okay. And when he felt that, I felt that, that's when he kind of like, so if I'm going to turn sideways, right? I'm looking at you. He goes, just like that. And he releases me. He turns around and he floats and he goes into the darkness. At this point, I get brought up on my feet and now I'm floating like a ghost. And I know I'm traveling somewhere, but I just don't know where I'm going because it's pure black with white lights. And then I see a figure start to come into the picture as I'm going to that figure. And it turns out to be that it's somebody who I know. And this gentleman, his name is Mark. We used to be cops together and I was his financial professional, as well as good buddy. And we graduated together from the academy. Now, the backstory is Mark died in 2017 on the way to work in New Jersey from a horrible car accident by Life Stadium. And I'm like, Mark? And he's like, he has a raspy voice. So he's like, Bobby? I'm like, oh my God, Mark. And we like floated to each other and we started hugging each other. And it was like a reunion. And we're checking each other out like, wow, hey, how you been? Right? It's just like the conversation, like going to a supermarket, right? And you're just seeing someone you haven't seen since high school. And that's what it was like. But not once did we ever speak about being dead. Not once he never said, hey, what are you doing here? You're not supposed to be here. It's not your turn. It was nothing like that. It was just like we continued life, but we were talking about Earth. Mark was a client that always wanted reassurance to know that his family was going to be taken care of financially on Earth. And I always had to have that conversation at least once. Mark, I got you. I got you. Mark, if you die before me, I got you. So here I am in the spiritual realm, and I slap him on the chest. I said, what? Before I did that, I said, Mark, did you see what we did? He's like, yes, I saw everything. Thank you so much. And then I slap him on the chest. I go, I effing told you that we were going to take care of them. And he was just so grateful for what we did for him, his wife and son. He had life insurance with us, and he just wanted to make sure his wife was taken care of financially. And I did that. And it's just to show you never know who you're going to see in the next life. So you better make sure that you do the right things on this earth, right? Because you never know. They could be, if I would have liked to Mark could have had a baseball bat waiting for me over there. You just never know. And we embraced, and, we just kept looking at each other like, oh man, like I haven't seen you for a while. And then the next thing you know, we're hugging like this, and he fades away, and then I fade away, and then I wake up in ICU. I open up my eyes, I see those white tile ceilings like a hospital, and I wake up. And waking up, I think, was the worst experience for me, but I'll get into that in a second. So I will tell you that for me, it felt like 10 minutes. I felt like I was out for 10 minutes. I saw Jesus, I saw Mark, and then I came back. And the reality is, Vladimir, was 9 days. I woke up on my daughter's birthday. And I wake up to habit because everybody's going crazy. Again, I'm not coherent to what happened. I don't understand what happened. All I know is I wake up and a guy comes in fully geared up in protective gear. He's Asian, and he's like, "Hey, Robert, how you doing?" I'm like, "Who the F are you? And where the heck am I?" Right? The cop comes out. And he's like, "Oh, you're in the hospital." I'm like, but no one said to me, let's say it was you, Vladimir. Vladimir, listen, you're in the hospital. This is what happened to you. Your kids know what's happened. Your wife knows everything's okay. No one told me that. I woke up to panic because it was COVID-19 and everybody was going crazy in the hallways because I could see through the glass door that patients were running out. It was like episode 1 of season 1 of The Walking Dead. Everybody's just going crazy. And there's a reason why I tell you the hospital, and I'll get to it. So at this point, I wake up. I don't know what's going on. I speak to my wife, I think a day later or the same day later on. And, I wasn't too comfortable speaking to my wife because I thought that I was there because they wanted to steal my organs. There was, COVID's going around. I can't put two and two together. But I do remember that when I was watching TV, that they talked about COVID, and that's how I knew about COVID. That reminded me. I'm like, oh, I remember COVID. So it turns out that as I did a self-assessment, I couldn't bend my left leg. I was bedridden. I don't know why. Eventually I did. It was called lumbar radiculopathy. I may have been dropped, which caused a nerve damage in my back. And that's why I couldn't bend my leg. So I was bedridden. So I'm finding a tool of weapon. So I'm checking and I find a tool. I'm like, oh, what's this? I go, oh, maybe I have COVID. And if anybody screws with me, I'm going to pull the tube out and spray the staff, and hopefully that'll kill them. This is where I'm at. Right? And not knowing, by the way, that if I pull the tube out, I'm going to kill myself. It was a tool. I was getting dialysis through the tube while I was intubated. Nobody told me. So I'm fighting the staff for about 2-3 days. I'm sleep deprived. I'm food deprived because, again, I'm thinking they're trying to kill me. And I remember the first time I spoke to my wife, she goes, "Hi, baby, how are you?" And I said, "This is BS. Get me the F out of here." And she says, no, babe, you can't. You died. I'm like, what? I didn't believe it. And I was like, she's in on it. She's getting paid to be in on this whole course ordeal of stealing my organs. So after 2-3 days of fighting the staff, there's a gentleman who walks in. Now, it's like being a prisoner. When I used to work in the correctional facility. They start to know the patterns. I'm starting to study the patterns of who's supposed to be here, what time it is, who's supposed to come in, right? So I had the same night nurse. So I knew it was nighttime. That this gentleman walks in, African-American black male, walks in, and he walks in a different color scrub than anybody else. It's lime green. I haven't seen lime green on the floor. I still remember to today. It's either white or navy blue, and that was it. Nobody else wore different colors. So this black gentleman walks in, and I'm laying in bed, and he goes to grab my wrist, which he does. And he goes to me, "Hello, my son." I said, "Get the F off of me. Who the F are you?" It wasn't that nice. It was more aggressive, right? Just for the record. And he goes, "I was sent here because I'm a prayer warrior. And your wife asked me to come here and pray for you." And then he goes into, "Your wife and kids are every day outside," and he points out the window, "praying for you at 7:00 every evening," which I didn't know. And they were on social media. They would have thousands of people praying for me every day at 7:00 live on Facebook. And I said, before he says all of that, I said to him, why are you praying for me? And that's when he explained that my wife is praying for me and he's a prayer warrior. When I heard him say that, Vladimir, I kid you not, the only time I ever heard the word prayer warrior was from my wife. And I could hear my wife speaking through this individual. And then I gasp, take a deep breath, and I felt that peace that I felt when I was dead. So then I just relinquished power. I said, fine, I'll be treated. Because he said, "I'm here to pray for you. Your wife sent me to pray for you because she wants you, to be treated and stuff like that." And I said, "Oh, fine." And I relinquished authority over to the medical staff, and then I got treated. and I was willing to eat and all that stuff. I was so weak, I couldn't even open up a can of soda. That's how weak I was. I couldn't even, the little milk cartons, couldn't even do that. And I was willing to be medically treated. So after 2 weeks go by the way, I was in the hospital for 33 days. So 2 weeks go by, and I tell my wife the story. I said, hey, and his name was, damn, I just forgot. I had him. I forgot his name. I can't believe I forgot his name. I tell her the story about this gentleman walking in, and this is what happened. And so she calls the hospital, and she asks, I forgot the name, but it is such and such. She became friends with the hospital staff, so she calls the hospital just to send them like a gift card. Thank you, because of him, now he's willing to be treated. And
by the way, was it Kendrick? The name Kendrick?
Yes, thank you. I knew it was like the K. So she calls the hospital and she tells the hospital, hey, this gentleman Kendrick went into my husband's ICU room. And if you know ICU, by the way, everything is documented. Who's in and who's out. So I just want to send them a gift card. She's like, sure, I'll look into it. Well, long story short, there's no Kendrick. And then when I hear that and she hears that, she then puts two and two together. And then she calls me and she says, I think I know who Kendrick is. And who is it? She was praying for Jesus to show up in the flesh. So I was willing and able to get treated medically. And that's who my Kendrick was. He was Jesus in the flesh. Because he doesn't exist. There's no record of him signing into the room. It made sense why he had a different color scrubs. And then when I look back, the night nurse, which was on the right side of my bed, never acknowledged. She must have been saying, oh, he's just going nuts. I'm talking to, nobody. She never acknowledges. She doesn't even interrupt. She doesn't even say anything to me. So it all made sense when I look back. So Kendrick was my Jesus in the flesh. So what did I learn? Well, number one, God is real. That's not even up for discussion. And I understand people have their opinions and they're entitled to, but it's my life, my belief, my experience, my testimony. And I live for me and my kids and my wife. So God is real. I believe that we don't die. We pass. We pass over, right? And when we pass, we lose 5 emotions. We lose worry, doubt, fear, pain, and suffering. Worry, doubt, fear, pain, and suffering. And the reason for that is because when I was with Mark, I wasn't thinking about my bills. I wasn't thinking like, oh man, I gotta go, get milk. I wasn't worried about it. It was just clear-minded clarity. And I was just talking to Mark and I was zoned in. Right. So now people may say, well, wow, that's a big deal. But when we're born, we're not born with worry, doubt, pain, and suffering. We're only born with fear. And babies are born with the fear of falling and loud noise. Everything else is influenced, right? I've done the research of stuff like this after my experience. So when we go out, we lose it all, those 5 things. So if you've lost a loved one from cancer and they were suffering here, they're at a better place, and I'm going to describe that place now. So when we pass, we lose those 5 emotions, but we gain tranquility. We gain peace to a level that you cannot fathom in this earth. But most importantly, we gain love. And it's not the love you have for your newborn. It's not the love you have for your significant other. It's not like when you go to work, you kind of forget about your wife or husband, and then you're focused on work. No, this love is overbearing. It's perfect. It's through you. It's around you. It's inside of you. There is no running away from it. It's like you're in smoke, and no matter where you go, there's going to be smoke, and that smoke is love. I can't describe it to you because it's like a woman trying to describe to me what it is to give birth. I'm never going to get it. I have to go through the process. It's the same love that you get when you pass over. That it's so enticing, this love, that when I came back, I told my wife, I don't mind dying again. I really don't. Now I do, of course. But she's like, no, we have kids. And I was like, oh, that's right. We got kids and we're my bad. And, what I've done in research, Vladimir, is looked at people's near-death experiences. And those that have no purpose in life are miserable when they come back. They're miserable because they know the other side is better than what it is here. So knowing this, now I understand, and I promised you I was going to bring this all back together. Now I understand why my grandmother was taken first. Now I rejoice for her because it's so beautiful on that side. I mean, it's just hard to describe it. My grandfather went like, oh man, I know exactly what he's going through. I know exactly what Mark is going through. And many people won't understand that because they haven't experienced what I've experienced. And I get it. In my outer shell, when I hear someone passes, I'm sorry. My condolences. My inner shell, I'm jumping for joy because I know how great that amusement park is, how much fun and peace and love they're feeling right now. And because of that, I'm not afraid of dying. I know where I'm going, and I know the feeling of being there. I just don't want to go to her now. Right. So what did I learn in life? Well, number one, and this is for maybe some of you that are listening, if you have not amended a relationship, go amend it. Forgiveness is not for them, it's for you. Because every time you think of that person, the weight of the world is on you, right? As soon as you just hit them up and be like, hey, you know what? I just want to apologize for whatever, even if you're not at fault, it just releases that weight. So if there's someone in your life who you haven't amended your relationship with, please go do it. You want to make sure that when you go out, you don't want to go out with a bang, but you want to go out where your closet is clear. There's nothing hanging there that you never took care of. And I did that. When I died, I did that. I didn't have a great relationship with my mother, my biological father, or my stepfather. And as soon as I woke up, those were the three people I called. As soon as I was coherent of knowing. And then I visited them all and I amended my relationships with them. It doesn't mean that they're going to change, but now we have a respectful relationship where when I go again, I know that at least I left in good matters with the people that I love and care about. So amend those relationships. Number two, stop stressing the small stuff. It's not worth it. I see people get overwhelmed, especially my son. Oh, this kid. I'm stop wasting your energy. Stop stress. I know it's difficult to do so. It's part of human nature. But if you refocus yourself and be in alignment with God, and, when I get upset now and I get mad now, I pull out my Bible and I just read scripture. Or I'm not perfect. I get upset. And when I'm upset, I'm like, God, teach me wisdom of how to get over the situation, bring me peace, right? And if you're willing to embrace it, it'll hit you. And all of a sudden, it's a shift of energy. So don't sweat the small stuff. Number three, your job is not that important. It is, if you're right, but it's not that important. It's not that important as compared to spending time with the people you love. And I'll tell you why. When I was 41 years old, I didn't think I was going to die. And I was a workaholic. And it happened from one day to another. I don't know when the clock is over again. Right? My son is over here next to me. He's on his tablet. But if my son wants to hang out, I hang out. My kids, my wife wants me to do something, I do it, because I don't know when the clock is over again. And some of us are so caught up in social media and impressing other people and doing things at a job just to pay. Look, God will take care of everything, which leads to my last point. You're not in control. Newsflash. God's in control. And the quicker you understand that and accept that, you will be less stressed. You'll be a lot more laid back. You'll be a lot more low key, and you will enjoy life, the gift this is, for what it is. And that's the 4 rules I can give you about living life today. I'm a lot more low key. If you met me before death, I was up there like, aggressive, because I'm not in control. If this doesn't happen, this, a promotion or a raise, or, you have a health issue. I have health issues. I have multiple sclerosis. I didn't take it as a negative. I took it as a challenge to get better in another category. One door closes, another one will open as long as you seek it. So that's pretty much it.
Well, there's a lot to unpack here, but Bobby, what's interesting, I was expecting for the first person to show up outside of Jesus, your grandmother, right? She meant so much to you. And it's interesting that it's your friend Mark that showed up. Do you know why?
My opinion is because I have a huge platform in our company that I can share my testimony to thousands of people in one shot rather than doing it one by one. That's number one. Number two, because I talk about Mark in business before my experience, right? Because of Mark, I was able to serve about 15 different police departments with their finances, right? So it also gave me the ability to go back to the police department, and because my wife and I run a nonprofit organization, and what we did was we just gave them like a lunch, like a buffet lunch, and I was there personally at that time in a wheelchair, and I was able to see the brothers and sisters I work with and share my testimony. And in law enforcement, it's a lot of machismo, right? We don't talk about that stuff. But because it's me, because of my reputation, when I was an officer, I have amended a lot of relationships with cops with God. Not me, but brought them back. Like, people have told me, hey, you weren't full of crap when you worked here. We knew when you said something, you meant it. And the fact that, you shared this with us, you've made my relationship better with God. Man, so I think it was just, I can get a bigger platform to share my testimony through Mark, because a lot of people knew Mark. And and in our company, I get to speak in front of thousands of people where I can do that. And
speaking of Mark, have you had a chance to speak to his family since then and share this experience with them? What was their reaction?
So I spoke to his wife. I'm going to keep her name anonymous. I spoke to his wife, and I told her that I saw Mark, and, she has trouble. She has trouble. She has trouble when it comes to faith, because Mark was taking but I did say to her, I called her while I was in the hospital, and she was more concerned about me getting better than anything else. And I did mention to her that I did spend time with Mark. He's okay. He's happy. You're going to see him the same way you remember him. And he was just very joyful, and he's at peace. And, I think personally it was possibly difficult for her to understand that, especially she still heard it, and it's been since 2017. And when you lose your love of your life, it's tough. I can't judge someone because I'm not there. But I definitely spoke to her. I definitely gave her what I went through personally and the experience with Mark, and, answer any of her questions. But she was so delightful that she was just worried about me getting better, and she just has her challenge, and that's okay.
Well, and that's totally understandable. I'm curious, what about your wife? What did she think of this experience?
Oh. People call me a miracle. I'm not the miracle. I'm not. The miracle is my wife. The miracle is my kids that were coherent of what was happening. They're the ones that had to go through this every single day. They're the ones that went out there and prayed for me. They're the ones that their emotions were in a roller coaster. I didn't know what was going on. I was asleep. So when people say, oh, you're a miracle, I'm not. My wife is. My daughters are. My son was too young. They're the ones because they're coherent. They're going through a battle themselves of what's happening with him. I can't see him. I can't touch him. I can't even just call him when I want, and just going through so many challenges while I'm in the hospital that I am not aware of. So they're the miracle, and I, especially my wife, I think of if personally, and I'm not going to say this because it's my wife, but my wife handled this situation like
a pro.
Like a professional, because I think anybody else would be like, hey, just let him go. Wouldn't
be in
know
panic
what
mode.
Wouldn't know what, just let him go. I want his life insurance policy, right? No, just.
Well, and the fact that she went to her pastor and the wisdom of the pastor not to give up on you and go back and speak life, that's huge too.
Yeah, it's just those little things, the way she carried herself in the house, like she didn't panic. You hear her on the 911 call, like she was. I don't think I would be here, honestly, if it wasn't for my wife and all the steps that she took all the way till she couldn't do any more at the hospital. Because I think anybody else would have panicked, doesn't know what to do, would waste precious time, whatever it is. My wife is a champion, and she's got a heart of gold for what she's done for me.
And that's crazy. So you flatlined for 5 times, right? You died 5 times.
5 times, yeah. And one of them was for 40 minutes.
You are a miracle. But I'm curious, what was the cause of all that?
So it turns out to be, well, first of all, nobody knew. Mm-hmm. Nobody knew. Even in the hospital, when I got discharged, nobody knew. So what it turns out to be that I had been living with so many years, well, I'll make this easy. So I have a medical term called, I was born without the factor V lead gene. So I have factor V deficiency. What is that, Bobby? Easy. That gene keeps your blood thin naturally. I was born without it. 41 years, I was good. All of a sudden, 41 years and March 23rd, I wake up and a blood clot had released from my leg and caused an embolism, which led me go into heart failure, kidney failure, and lung failure. And eventually they found that there was blood clots in both of my legs and in my heart. Wow. Mind you, 2 weeks before, they did full blood work because I was up for my medication for MS and found nothing. And for 41 years, everything was great, not knowing that I wasn't born with this. And all of a sudden it caught up.
Do you feel like, Bobby, do you feel like you needed this experience?
Yeah. Oh, totally.
Why do you think so?
Because I was not a believer like that. I was a hard ass. I was an a-hole. I was aggressive. My marriage wasn't going great because of my attitude. I've also, and I haven't said this publicly, but I will now because I don't care. I've had a demonic attachment, which I was not aware of for many years. And when I woke up, I can feel the difference of everything being lifted and off. And my wife will tell you that she knew I was going to die because God told her that I was going to die, just not when. And I bust her job. You could have told me I was going to die. I would have been ready. But God had told her that I needed, God would tell her, hey, I need to spend time with him. It's going to be tough, but my wife says I'm that stubborn that I needed to go through this because if it was any other way, I wouldn't believe it.
Bobby, you said demonic attachment. Are you at liberty to talk more about that?
Yeah, sure.
What exactly was it?
So it turns out to be that is generational on my dad's side.
Is it more like anger, like that kind of?
Yeah, like anger, like I don't care, like I say whatever I want to say and not worry about the repercussions. And
so that wasn't the personality trait, right?
No, because since it's been lifted, and by the way, it got lifted in January of this year. I died, and I'll tell you why. So when I died, I came back, I was like a different person. And I thought meeting Jesus was enough. So I didn't go into scripture. I didn't go into reading the Bible. And then, my wife's telling me, hey, you need to do this. But when something's attached to you and someone's speaking to you, it's very hard to hear them when this thing is attached to you and it's in your head saying, don't listen to her. She's full of it. Whatever. So I went back to my old ways. And then finally, when my wife got fed up with it, I could sense I was at the end. And then all of a sudden, I'm at a friend's house here in Georgia, and that peace came back. That same peace I talked about before, out of nowhere. This was probably in the middle of January, and I've been good ever since. I've been good at now, I've been reading scripture. I've been reading. So now my wife says, you've had a demonic attachment for years. Now I get it. Before, when it's you and this thing, it's in your head. Now it's like I'm hearing, I'm understanding because I'm clear. It's just me. There's nothing else attached to me. And I learned about that the demonic generational, the generational demonic goes through my father's side. Now I understand where it came from, and I do believe it. I've seen my father on video act certain ways that's really weird. I won't get into that because that's his story, but it's not normal. And I'm like, I could sense something's wrong. But I've had an attachment for many years and not knowing. And even though my wife told me, I just wouldn't listen because at the same time, there's somebody else in my ear. But now I have clarity. Even when I did my last testimony on the podcast, probably the last one you saw, it was around.
Interesting. So this is brand new.
Yeah, but I didn't know because I wasn't listening, because I couldn't listen, because when I tried to listen, it wasn't me listening. It was that thing in my head telling me, they're just lying. She's just lying to you. So I've been having clarity since January. I thought maybe it was a me problem, but it was demonic. And then I understand that I have to read scripture and I should be praying every day because I didn't want it to go to my son. So it's like the buck stops here.
That's powerful.
Yeah. And so, I got my Bible somewhere right next to me usually. And so that's where I'm at now. I'm free from it. Even my wife's seen a difference in me. It's hard for her to believe, but
it takes time.
But it's like, hey, this is me. Like, I'm cool. Yeah, I'm funny. Yeah, that's really me, right? But I've had it for so many years that, even probably before I met my wife, I just didn't know.
Practically speaking, how can someone detach themselves from those demonic attachments?
So the first step is you probably don't know. There's a good chance you don't know unless it's disclosed itself. I had to learn the hard way of what's going on. I didn't detach it. It left after it caused so much damage. And my wife, her heart was breaking and she was at the boiling point of the tip of the end. I just felt a sense of peace. But when I say peace, I mean, the weight lifted off my shoulders, but now I'm able to hear you. So if you said to me, in this season of peace, hey, Bobby, you had an attachment. It was demonic. And then you're like, that makes sense. That's why I felt like this. That's why I felt like that. What do I need to do to keep it away? read scripture, read the Bible, pray, join a men's group, right? Maybe you need to seek counseling. Got it. So I can't tell you how to get rid of it. I can tell you that once it leaves, what to do to keep it out.
Because they say it comes back 7 times happier, right?
Correct. And let me tell you, if you think you're going through a demonic attachment, don't be embarrassed. In my case, I just didn't know. But if you know, don't be embarrassed. You can't fight that war by yourself. You need to tell people you trust to pray for you, pray together to fight that war, because it's not a war you're going to win by yourself. It's just not. It's just not.
It's interesting because my parents, my mom and dad, they're prayer warriors, and they always tell me, hey, you're battling something, don't do it alone. Give us a call. Yeah. Let us join in. Let's talk about Jesus a little bit. So you were describing Jesus in the near-death experience. It was very similar to my experience too. And I remember I spoke with him telepathically. It's like there were emotions, there were some telepathy, but it's interesting when he manifested himself in your hospital room, he came back as a black man. That's interesting. Why do you think he manifested himself to you that way?
Because the majority of the staff was black. Probably wanted to blend in with the staff.
That's interesting.
So you don't want to stick out like a sore thumb either, but when you have the green line scrubs, it may be for me to remember, that who he was, because he's the only one that had green scrubs on.
Since that experience, have you had any other supernatural experiences?
Yeah, I've had a lot. So
any in particular that stand out that to this day you're still thinking about?
So, no, it's just today life is like, I always get my testimony in with everybody I meet because I don't know where they are in life. So that's number one. And you'll be surprised the feedback you get after little bit. Are you an angel? I'm like, no, why? Oh, my husband has cancer and he's worried about dying, right? Is it, stuff like that happens all the time. I've had clients I met with on video where this one client, she's like, oh, I'm on a medication for depression. I said, do you mind me asking why? And she's like, yeah, my father passed and I'm not sure if he is in heaven. And this one I'll never forget. And I said, all right, hold on. I shared her my testimony. Mind you, I don't know this woman. She doesn't know me. She's just a client I just met. And I said, with that said, I'm going to describe something to you. So I described her father to the T. And it's not like, oh, he has got 2 eyeballs and a nose. No, it's like, okay, so look, I said, because I know there's a lot of phonies out there. I said, look, I see this man. He's got glasses out. They're black framed glasses, clear, but they're right. He's a little olive skin, but I see him wearing not the khaki hat. It's a hat that men wear, not a baseball cap, not a round hat. It's like a capri, I think, capri hat maybe. It's a special looking hat. I said, I see him like that. I said, he's wearing brown polyester pants because he loves brown polyester pants. He's got a black belt, black shoes, and he's wearing a white shirt buttoned up to here with the, what's it called? The Italian underwear tank top underneath, whatever that's called, that you wear under suits. She starts crying. It's her dad.
Wow.
Yeah. So when I get messages like that where it's specific, and I say, oh, wait a second, I see this woman, she's about 5'3", walking in, she's about 5'3". She used to love doing her hair, and she has a puffy blonde hair, always doing the perm with the other women. She's wearing pink polyester pants. She likes wearing flowery, silky shirts. She also has big frame glasses, and they're gold. She's like, that's his mother.
Wow.
All right. So when I get stuff like that, it's to the T. It's not generalized.
And do you see it kind of like a vision, like an image in front of you?
I see like a vision of them walking in from somewhere.
And you feel like God gives you these visions as a way to encourage?
Yep, absolutely. Because I never had these before. There's times I have to give messages to people, even if they're strangers. And if I don't, this is what God likes to tickle me. It's not really tickle. He'll make me cry. I just start bawling and I'm like, okay, I'm going to say it. Like, stop it. That's how I know the message is him. It's not the adversary. That's how I know it's him. And I would get messages and I would start crying, and then I would relate the message and it would stop like turning off a faucet like that. I have been asked about people on social media about dying, whether they are alive or dead. Sometimes if I get a message whether the person's dead, but they're in a coma, I relate that. But it's always third party. They go through my wife. They're like, hey, what do you think about, this person? They've been in a coma for 6 days. They had an aneurysm. And if I start crying, then the message comes in. When I say I start crying, it's not on my own account. I'm crying because the message is starting to come in from upstairs. And that's how I know it's legit. And I'll say, the last person was in a coma from an aneurysm. It was like day 6. And I said, she passed already 2 days ago. And the next morning she passes. But she was already dead 2 days ago. Things like that.
Wow.
So I get messages. I do see visions. And I do have to speak to strangers, even though we're told not to. When I'm supposed to, because I'm being used as a vessel to share some type of message. The good news is, though, I don't charge $3.99 a minute like Cleo.
It's free 99, right?
Yeah, it's free 99.
Well, it's interesting. You were sharing the near-death experience, and now it's always fascinating to me. Like, what does that realm look like? Is it like more real in this life? Do you see colors you don't see here? Did you have a body? What did that look like?
So I could see myself I could see myself, out of body and then back in the body. But it was very black. It was black. But I could see these little white lights like this, like rectangular white lights. So I knew that I was going a certain direction. There was no solid wall. It was just, you're in a black space and there's lights all, on the sides of you, so you know which direction you were going. It's nothing like, oh, did you see the bright light or did you see anything colorful? I didn't. It was pretty much.
What did this experience do to your relationship with Jesus? Do you feel like you can now boldly come to the throne of God, so to speak? Do you speak to him differently? How does that look like now going forward?
He's my dad. That's it. He's my father. And I talk to him as needed. I call him dad. Because that's who he is to me. Especially, I'm willing to give up everything for that man. Because number one, I'm supposed to. And number two, I know that I'll be taken care of in the next life.
Well, Bobby, I know you shared quite a bit, man. What an amazing story. But in closing, I know there are people watching who, like you, in the beginning, you described people stressed out, anxious. There's so much pressure on them, and they're curious about Jesus. They're curious about afterlife. Yeah, what would you say to that person?
This is what I say. Dying is beautiful. There's nothing to be afraid of. You may pass and not even know it. So when your turn is up, embrace yourself for the love you're about to get. It's It's beautiful.
Love that.
It's like drugs. I know it sounds wrong, but it's like drugs to a drug addict. Right? It's so
Except it satisfies, right?
Yeah, you know how they say like rest in paradise or rest in peace? That's exactly what you're doing. Like I think somebody died and came back and made that up because that's exactly what you're doing. And it's just overwhelming of the love you feel, and you're going to be okay. Life is going to continue. You're going to lose those emotions like I described before, but man, like I said before, in my inner shell, I jump for joy when people pass away. It's just, again, I'm sorry I don't have words for it, but it's
in a better place.
Yeah.
Well, Bobby, in closing, I'd love for you to just briefly share if someone wants to get in touch with you, what would be the best way to connect with you?
Well, you can just look me up, Bobby Saroza, Saroza. I am on Facebook. If you have questions, you can hit me up there. I am also on Instagram at bsaroza. You can hit me up there. I'm very transparent in my testimony. I don't argue with people who hit me up and tell me otherwise because, as a Christian, we're not supposed to do that. But most importantly, my ego doesn't get in the way because it's my testimony, right? But you can look me up, Bobby Saroza, on Facebook. You'll see me and my family. It's a family picture. And you can hit me up there. I've had people do that in the past, and it's worked out well.
Well, Bobby, thank you so much for your time. You've been so generous with your time. Appreciate you so much, man.
No problem. Vladimir, thank you so much and your staff for having me today. I appreciate you. Stay blessed. And like they say in The Chosen, shalom.
Likewise, shalom. All right, hope you enjoyed this conversation with my friend Bobby. Before you leave, I want to again invite you to join us at family.godsvoiceday.com. It's a private standalone community. If you take the time to join, I will take the time to personally record a welcome video for you with your name on it. So take me up on that. And lastly, please like and subscribe to this channel. It helps me spread the message. And also, the more subscribers I have, the more people I can get on this show. And the next video that you should be seeing, it's with my friend Mark Nelson. This guy had a near-death experience. This guy lived a homosexual lifestyle. He died, had a face-to-face encounter with Jesus, and came back as a straight man. So you don't want to miss this powerful testimony. It should be coming up here on the screen somewhere at the top, or check the description below. But until next time, have a great rest of the day, and I'll look forward to chatting with you inside of our private community at family.godsvoiceday.com. Take care. Bye-bye.